How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Perfect Reload Weekly, where we normally take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, but this week we are not doing that. So it's kind of the holiday season, that week between Christmas and New Year's, where there's really not a lot going on. Most media outlets aren't really doing anything. A lot of video game studios are off to give people a break. So not really anything to talk about with the news, and no new video game releases came out, so nothing to really talk about there. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to start the new year off, because this is coming out on January 1st, with a 2024 year preview. We're going to take a look at the games that have firm release dates, though of course they could certainly get delayed. And then we'll also talk about some of the games that have been announced for 2024, but do not have a set release date as of yet. But the first part of this video is going to be kind of a channel update. I talked last week about wanting to kind of discuss some of the changes that are going to be coming to the channel this year, because I think 2023 was the first full calendar year of taking this channel, very seriously and putting a lot of work into it. And I learned a lot about how, what it takes to kind of grow a small YouTube channel, what works, what doesn't work, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to kick things off with that, but there will be timestamps down below. So if you want to skip the channel update and just go to the year in preview, you'll be able to do that. But for those that want to stick around and hear me talk a little bit about my thoughts on the channel and what we're going to do in the coming year, thanks for hanging out. 2023. So 2023 was huge. The channel grew. I wish I wrote it down, because I can't find the recap anymore in the YouTube app. But the channel grew something like 200 something percent, which is nuts. I started off with the year. I want to say it was like 3,000, 4,000 views, total video views on the channel or something like that, because I had a couple of videos that hit 1,000 views. And then now we are at, I'm going to check real quick. I think we are something crazy, like 45,000 views or something like that. Let me see here. What's it say? 45,084 views as we sit here. So we will eclipse 50,000 in the coming weeks. And that's just wild to me. It really does blow me away that there are people that watch this. I knew that there were people that I know in real life that watch the channel from time to time. But the fact that it's reached people that I've never met, it's just crazy. And I really enjoyed it. I loved every second of working on the channel over the past year. I certainly didn't accomplish everything I wanted to do, with the channel in 2023. Specifically, I wanted to get more of those animated videos out. I only got 2 out. I would have liked to have maybe done like 6. I think that would have been great. But 2023 was a really trying year. 2022 was the worst year of my life, which is why I took the entire year off essentially from doing the channel. I pretty much stopped in November of 2021 and didn't pick it back up until I think it was September of 2022. 2023 unfortunately was not much better. But I kind of focused on the channel and getting things going. And that was, I really did enjoy doing it. So the stuff that I have learned over the years, that obviously YouTube really wants you to do the YouTube shorts. So I put a little bit more emphasis on doing those and focusing my time and efforts on that rather than doing some of the animated videos. But even though I want to play the game that YouTube wants you to play to grow, I still want to take the time to work on those animated videos and get more out. So that will be a big emphasis for this coming year. I'm already more than halfway done with the next one. It's going to be out in January. As of right now, I don't want to say exactly when in January. I still have quite a bit of work to do on it, but it's like I said, it's more than halfway done. Within the next couple of weeks, I imagine it's going to be out. And therein lies kind of like one of the things I want to talk about is like the branding of the channel and all that. I've never really had a good name for those animated videos. In the videos themselves, I always say welcome to Perfect Reload. And I kind of just internally and I guess externally in the community posts and talking about it on this show, I always refer to them as like a traditional Perfect Reload video. But what the hell is that? Because everything that exists on this channel is a Perfect Reload video. That's the name of the channel. Now, the name made more sense before I changed the name of the channel, which is why why you could see the disconnect there. So starting with the next videos, I figured we'd start fresh with the first video for the year, brand new year. Those are now going to be called Video Game Sludge. I think it's a very fitting title for just how kind of odd and weird they are. And I will say, I'm not trying to hype it up or anything, but the next video is definitely the most odd and off the beaten path thing that I have done yet. So I think it is kind of an apt thing for that. You've probably noticed this podcast next week when it goes back to its normal format will have a little bit new look to it. But you'll notice that some of the branding on the channel, the designs, the next time I stream or cover a game, that overlay, like there's a new logo for the channel, new colors for the channel. Last year, I really liked that 70s cream with the dark color look that I kind of ripped off from Starfield. I just really enjoyed. It wasn't trying to do like a Starfield branding thing, but I just really liked their choice of colors for some of their marketing. So I decided to steal from that and but it's a new year, so let's try something new. So there'll be a new look towards to everything starting in the coming weeks as we start picking things back up again once games start coming out. Because it's I think January 18th. I'm looking at my list for later on the show. January 18th is the first major release of the year, so not too far away from kind of getting back into the swing of things. So yes, Video Game Sludge, that'll be the new name going forward for the animated videos. And the first one, like I said, is coming out in January. The goal right now is I'd like to hit that 6. That's one every 2 months. I don't know. We'll see if we can hit that. But that's the goal. The next thing is there is going to be a greater emphasis on shorts. Shorts are really what drives views and drives people to the channel. When you're looking in your YouTube app, you can see what videos got people to subscribe. And for the most part, I would say probably 90% of them this year were through the shorts. So I kind of have to, if I want to keep the channel growing, I've got to do it. Those shorts are very different than anything else I do on the channel. It's kind of a weird kind of scripted comedy thing. It's not for everybody. I don't expect it to be for everybody, but it's kind of what's worked. I've tried like 3 or 4 different things and it's kind of what worked. And I've definitely pushed the border on it. It's at the point now where TikTok and I do not agree on what is acceptable content in my shorts. So TikTok, for the last 7 videos I have uploaded, has not pushed those out to people. They all have less than like 5 views on them. So I am done uploading to TikTok. They are just obviously not interested in me having my stuff on there. YouTube's a little bit less restrictive, but they have certainly, I hate to use the word like shadow banned or shadow blocked, but there are, I would say 2 or 3 shorts that I uploaded that just didn't get sent out. There's the Video Game Feet one and the Grand Theft Auto one from a few weeks ago, where if I look in my thing, it'll say like, here's how many people watched the video and here's how many people we showed the video to. And it just says we showed the video to 0 people. The only people that watched were the people that saw it in the subscription feed or happened to search for one of the hashtags or whatever and found it that way. They actually did not send it out to anybody. So I'm trying to figure out where that line is, because I don't swear in those videos, whereas I do swear, not a ton, but in the podcast I certainly have, and in some of the videos covering games I certainly have, and live streams I certainly have, and those are fine. But in the shorts I never do, and there's obviously something that they don't like about them, and I can't quite figure out what that is. And of course there's no answer, there's no guidebook. There's no list of words that YouTube finds okay and doesn't find okay. Everybody has kind of figured out that, shit is pretty much okay to say, but fuck isn't within the first, I think it's the first 20 seconds of a video. Could be first 2 minutes of a video. I'm not quite positive. But it's very bizarre. I think the Grand Theft Auto one got not sent out because I used the word twerking. And I don't know, maybe that's what it was. That's the only thing I can think of, because I make a lot of like jokes about like cults and just like crazy stuff like that. And that seems to be totally okay. I make a lot of like bizarre drug and religious references because the whole shtick is kind of like a bizarre, like bleeding heart that's trying to get you to stop playing video games. And so I draw from a lot of influences from stuff you see in the media on that stuff. And that all seems to be totally okay. But I guess me mentioning the word twerk. It wasn't like, I don't know. It's really weird. So the shorts thing has been a constant struggle to see what hits and what doesn't hit. But yeah, there's going to be a more emphasis on, or a greater emphasis on those in the coming year. The only thing that I can see right now that is a planned backseat on stuff is like just general game coverage, like new releases. I really tried to cover like almost every single thing that came out last year to a degree. Some games just don't lend themselves to like video content. It's better for me to just talk about them in this podcast. But for the most part, I tried to show off everything I could. I think that I need to take a step back from doing that because it really got to the point where I keep like a to-do list, every day for what I have to do. And it was getting to the point where it was like 4 to 5 days a week. It's like, oh, I have to record this video. I have to record this video. I have to get this. I'm like, that's just not sustainable because then I don't have time to do anything else for the channel. I'm just devoting all my time to that. So that's going to be what takes a step back. Now, it's certainly not stopping by any stretch. It's just going to be, should I cover this wildly popular AAA game or this game that nobody's ever heard of? Now, I'd love to cover the game that nobody's ever heard of because it'd be great to kind of boost some of that stuff up. But you kind of have to make like a metered choice. So it's just going to be a case by case basis. It's not like I'm going to say like, oh, there's going to be no indie game coverage on this channel whatsoever, or there's only going to be AAA coverage. Like that's not going to be a thing. It really is just going to be a case by case basis. Like I'm looking at like the beginning of this year, like for the month of January, like Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is coming out on the 19th. That's a really big game that a lot of people are going to be talking about. I'm not going to cover. I have zero desire to play that game again. I have zero desire to spend money on that game. So we're not going to cover it. So it's just kind of making choices like that. The other one that's going to take a step back, and it's not necessarily because I wanted to, it's just eventually the series was going to end just because there's only a finite amount of things to talk about, and that's Full Motion Sickness. I was supposed to have a new episode up the other day, but I had issues with Premiere where I was only getting the game audio. It didn't have my audio. I'm not sure how that happened. So I have to, it's going to be up tomorrow. I'm just going to re-record it and it'll be up tomorrow. That show eventually is going to end because there's only so many weird 1990s FMV games to talk about. So that will eventually see a decline, over the year and stuff like that. I'm trying to figure out ways to kind of keep it alive because I love doing the FMV stuff. I don't necessarily want that show to just completely end. So I'm trying to figure out ways, and maybe I can take some of the longer FMV games like TLC, which is like 3 hours long or something like that, and try and find a way to maybe like edit it down and only cover like the crazy bits and stuff like that. Or maybe turning it into a scripted thing. Like I'm not entirely positive. So I want to do something with it. So there'll be, there'll be something to do with that throughout the year. And then the last big change that's going to happen to the channel this year is I've been talking about it on the podcast on and off for the past couple of months that I needed to change in jobs, day job. I needed to really make a change. And so I decided to enroll in a class to learn something new and pass the exam. I just passed the state exam and I'm all set with that. And I'm beginning that career this coming week. I start my like initial training with it. So I don't know what my life is genuinely going to be like once I really get into this. I'm sure probably going to be a lot busier. So, it's much more important for me to focus on my job than to focus on my hobby. And this is my hobby, unless all of a sudden this thing blows up and I start making money off of it, it's always going to take a back seat to something that actually pays the bills. I certainly am going to try my absolute best to balance both. But we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to make any, statements right now saying like, oh, I'm definitely going to have less time to spend on this channel. Maybe I find a way to make it work. Maybe I can dedicate 2 days a week to doing this and still keep everything going without a noticeable lapse in things on the channel. So, we'll wait and see. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to get into for the channel update, I think. I have other ideas for shows I'd like to do. I just don't know how to go about really doing them. But I really, truly, if we were like fantasy talking about, like what I'd like to do, I'd really like to do some interviews with people. people that work in the games industry. But, I think that might have to wait until this channel becomes a little bit bigger. If it ever does, it's possible that, and it doesn't grow like it did last year. There's a very real chance that it doesn't. But, I think it's at this point where I just need to keep kind of churning stuff out. So I can, if I want to approach someone about maybe working on something with them or doing an interview or whatever it is, I could say, here's this channel, here's what I've done, this is, and actually have a body of work to show somebody, and maybe that'll help things out. But that'd be really cool to do. I would love to do that at some point. And I don't know, maybe we'll be able to make that happen this year. But I think that's probably it for the channel update. And I'll be back in just a moment with the preview for 2024. All right, it is now time to get in to the year in preview. I think I might have said year in review earlier. No, this is the year in preview for 2024. I thought about maybe talking about games that I played this week, keeping that kind of going like a normal episode, but I honestly didn't play that much. I still keep meaning to get back into Baldur's Gate. I spent money on it months ago and haven't done really much with it since I played it the first 2 weeks it was out. I kind of pushed it aside, to play other stuff and didn't get around to it before Game of the Year. And I was like, oh, this time, in the holidays when it's dead, that's when I'll jump in. But instead my brain was like, hey, let's install Civ 5, not Civ 6, Civ 5, and play like 15 hours of that instead. And that's what I ended up doing. But I want to look forward to 2024 because it's kind of odd. Between all the announcements during the summer with Summer Games Fest, and Microsoft did their showcase, and Nintendo's had a few directs, and Sony did their state of play and all that stuff, and then we just had 9 million game announcements at the Game Awards just last month. There's actually not a ton with an announced release date for 2024. So many of the games that we saw over the past year either were just not for 2024 at all. They had no date attached, or maybe some of them did say 2025, or they just said 2024 without an actual release date. So the list I am going off of is Wikipedia's list, the 2024 in video games list. I'd like to get the Internet Games Database thing up and running. I tried messing around with it before, but I just couldn't get a handle on it. That seems to have more coverage of smaller games. So this is unfortunately limited to what's in Wikipedia's database. So this certainly isn't, a wide brush of everything. And also I was kind of picking and choosing things that I was interested in or things we would actually talk about on the channel. But the two ones to start off the year, January 18th, so just a couple of weeks away, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and Turnip Boy Robs a Bank are both coming out on the 18th. I didn't play Turnip Boy. Is it Turnip Boy Evades Taxes or Turnip Boy Does Tax Evasion or something like that? I want to play that before this comes out, because this actually looks like it'd be pretty fun to play, and it just seems like such a bizarre concept. And I remember that tax evasion game getting a lot of attention when it came out. So I want to pick this up. But the game I am definitely most looking forward to start the year is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. I will be picking that up. We will be covering it on the channel and both on the podcast and also, a gameplay video. I think it looks really, really nice. It's, bringing Prince of Persia kind of back to its original, roots of it being a side scrolling game. The only thing that I am worried about personally for it is it looks like it could be ridiculously hard. And I am not great at difficult games. So I'm hoping that maybe there will be some sort of difficulty slider or difficulty settings, stuff like that to kind of help out with that. But one way or another, I'm going to be jumping into that. I am really looking forward to it. The next day is Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, coming out on the PS5. I quite like The Last of Us Part 2. I would say I probably enjoyed it more than the first game, I guess, looking back on it. I've played the first game twice. I've only played the second game once. I played it, I bought it the day it came out and played through it. What was that? It was 2019 or 2020, right? Was that when that came out? When did that first game actually come out? It was 2020. Yeah, okay. That was like the last big game before the PS5 came out. So yeah, it wasn't that long ago, less than 3 years ago. It's just, I'm just not ready to play that game again. You know, maybe at some point I will, and I'll check it out. But, you know, I thought that maybe I would play through it again when the show came out, this past year. And it just, I don't know, it just didn't kind of click in my head. I think it's just still too recent for me. It is weird to get a remaster less than 3 years after the game comes out, but Sony likes to do that. It's just kind of their thing, I guess. It becomes a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. It's like, well, I guess I could buy this game for full price, and they're going to try and sell it to me for full price again in a couple of years. But I think it'll probably bring some newer people to the game. I'm sure there's some people that played or watched the show and played the first game and haven't gotten around to playing the second game yet. And you know, I'm sure when they saw that this was announced, they're like, oh, well, I guess we can check this out. So I'm sure it'll sell well. You know, I'm sure it'll do perfectly fine for them. But just one that I'm not personally interested in. One that I am interested in, January 26th, that is Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the next Like a Dragon game. This is them picking up where they left off with Like a Dragon, Yakuza 7, but they fully switched over to the Like a Dragon game or title now. That's what it was always called in Japan. It was never called Yakuza over there. I quite liked the last game. I thought it was very, very good. You know, I loved the switch to the turn-based strategy, or not turn-based strategy, turn-based RPG element. I thought it was great. I've never been a huge fan of Yakuza's hand-to-hand combat. You know, we played Like a Dragon Gaiden, which is, you know, or Like a Dragon, was it Gaiden Man with no... Yeah, Like a Dragon Gaiden and the Man Who Erased His Name. Yeah, we played that, and it's just, I don't know, that gameplay just doesn't do it for me. I love beat 'em ups. I grew up in the arcade playing beat 'em ups, but if I want to play a beat 'em up, I kind of want to play like a, you know, a 16-bit animated side-scrolling beat 'em up. I just don't really have the desire to play these ones in the 3D space, and I always felt like there was just a lot of padding in those games, and it was just kind of too much. I felt, honestly, in the last game, in Like a Dragon, I thought there was a little bit too much padding as well, but that's kind of an RPG thing. That's not necessarily a Yakuza series thing or like a Dragon series thing. That's just kind of indicative of the genre as a whole. But I am looking forward to playing it. I'd like to see where the story kind of picks up and goes. I don't know if I'm going to pick it up right when it comes out. We'll wait and see on that one. It's possible that I will, but you know, maybe. I am quite looking forward to it. Also that day is Tekken 8. Tekken 8, you know, I think a lot of people were kind of hoping that it was going to fall into 2023 because 2023 was really kind of like the year of fighting games. Like you saw a really good entry from Mortal Kombat and a really good entry from Street Fighter. And I think if they could have gotten Tekken in there, it probably would have been too much of like market saturation, because at least Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat had several months between releases, and they are quite different. But it would have been cool to be like, it was the year of all the you know, the great trio of fighting games, you know, having their big resurgence. Although, you know, Mortal Kombat's been great for a while. Street Fighter, I thought Street Fighter 5 was fairly poor. And Tekken 7 was probably the most well-received entry in the entire series. You know, I like Tekken. You know, Tekken's one of those games where if I'm in an arcade and they have a Tekken cabinet, I'll hop on and play. Tekken 3 has always been near and dear to me. I don't think that was the first one I played, but it might have been. Yeah, I spent a lot of time within the arcades, had the at-home version, you know, had the I think it was PS1 version of it. And I always really enjoyed it. I don't know if I'm going to get into Tekken 8 because I'm kind of fighting gamed out. I'm the kind of person that only picks one up every few years or so. And after playing so much Mortal Kombat and so much Street Fighter this past year, I don't know if I'm ready to just dive into another one again. But, you know, we shall see. And then speaking of fighting game franchises, but it's not a fighting game, it's actually something else. BlazBlue Entropy Effect. I was actually going to cover this game. They did like a demo or a beta of it a few months ago, and I just never got around to playing it. There was just other stuff happening at the time, and I just needed to prioritize those games instead. This is a side-scrolling, like roguelike type thing set in the BlazBlue universe. Now, I haven't kept up with BlazBlue in some time, so I don't know what the current roster is. I don't know what the current storyline is. That was probably, aside from the series that have been ongoing, like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, and to a degree, like Marvel vs. Capcom, it's been a while since the last one, but Blaze Blue, the first one, Calamity Trigger, that was like the first new fighting game in a really long time that I really, really got into. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic and played just an insane amount of that game. I tried to keep up with the sequels here and there. I didn't particularly care for the one where they mixed in like the Persona fighting game stuff, and I think there's maybe one other franchise that was mixed in there as well. I didn't really like that stuff. It was like the cross tag battle or something like that. But I really enjoyed the characters and the design and kind of the world that they had built. So I am interested in playing Entropy Effect. I didn't record it, but I did play a little bit of it when that thing came out. And I was just like, at the time I was like, oh, I want to record this, but there's all these other games right now. And it just kind of fell to the wayside. I just never got around to actually filming it. But I did have my hands on it just a tiny bit, and it played smooth. I'm sure the full version will. I don't know if there were like bugs or glitches or anything weird in the beta or demo. I can't exactly remember what they were calling it. Might have just been early access is what they were calling it. I didn't play enough to notice anything weird or any hiccups with it or anything to that degree. So I'm sure that if there were, hopefully, there will be some fixes for the final release coming out at the end of the month. The first big game of February we'll see what happens with this one. The long delayed Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is coming out on February 2nd. I don't know about this one. There was that big leak a couple weeks ago that people found a lot of details. And then somebody said that some of the details were made up, but then some of the details were legit. I won't get into the leaks. If you want to, you can look up like the biggest controversy I saw was what they were doing with Poison Ivy in the game. I don't know. I think that a lot of the people had two issues with the game when they were showing the trailers, which caused it to be delayed by almost an entire year. Was kind of just how generic everything looked, from a gameplay wise and also like a character standpoint. Like the different characters didn't necessarily seem like they stood out too much from each other. And then also like the heavy live service emphasis. And now they've said that they have really scaled back that live service element to the game. I think I saw somewhere that they were taking out some of the paid transactions and they were only going to be cosmetic. I could be totally wrong on that. I think there still is some type of battle pass system in it, but I'm not positive. My interest for the game is in the toilet. So I haven't had a reason to stay up to date on it. I can't imagine I don't see a world in which I'm spending money on this game. So I don't think that I will be picking this up unless for some bizarre reason the curiosity just really gets to me and I want to see it out of perverse curiosity or something. I don't know. But actually what's funny is that even it's been delayed. Even with the delay, not everything is going to be in it at launch. So the PC version is not coming out in February. It's coming out in March. So there's like a month delay for that. And then also the game will still require an online connection. It will be always online, but they said that some point in the future there will be an offline mode. So it's just like, it's got so many red flags that I can't imagine wanting to pick it up and check it out. But I don't know. We shall see. I assume it will probably dominate coverage that week for game releases. The following week is, it looks like I might have gotten some stuff written down wrong. Hang on just a moment. I think I wrote some of these release dates down wrong. I absolutely did. Give me just one moment. I'm looking at all the stuff, obviously, in a chronological order, and it looks like I just forgot to type some numbers. All right, so the next one up is Helldivers 2. I didn't play the first Helldivers. I like the marketing that they're doing with Helldivers 2. When they first showed that initial trailer last summer, I genuinely thought it was something to do with Starship Troopers because it had that kind of like satirical style to it with like the the recruitment stuff. So I thought that it was like a Starship Troopers thing, but it isn't. Helldivers 2, the sequel, they're changing a decent amount with it, and the fact that this is a third-person shooter and Helldivers was a top-down game, so definitely making a change there. I know some people that were like super into Helldivers that really enjoyed it. So I don't know if that love will transfer over with the shift from the top down to third person. Maybe it will. But I'm curious, despite not having a connection to the first game, I certainly don't ever let that stop me. I've played plenty of sequels to games without ever having played the first one because there's, the sequel just looks very appealing. I just did it recently with Alan Wake 2. And at least with Helldivers, I can't imagine I'm going to have to watch a few hours of lore videos on YouTube to get caught up for the sequel. So maybe that'll be one that kind of gets onto the docket. Next up on February 16th, I still am not convinced this video game actually exists, but apparently it's coming out. I know people have played it. I know people have recorded video of it being played. I am still convinced that it's an elaborate hoax, but apparently Skull and Bones will finally be coming out on February 16th. I don't know. It's been delayed for so long. Well, let me see. When did they actually? Let's take a journey for a moment, everybody. When did they announce it? Let's see. It began development in 2013, so it's going to be roughly 11 years since it came out. And that's right. It was initially supposed to be an MMO. It was an Assassin's Creed MMO called Black Flag Infinite. That's right. And then it kept changing. It started over from scratch at least once, where they just completely just tore it all down and began again with it. I don't know. I liked Assassin's Creed 4. That was like the last Assassin's Creed game that I really enjoyed playing. I liked 1 quite. I really liked Assassin's Creed 1. Assassin's Creed 2, I just, in the, that trilogy of Assassin's Creed 2 games, the Ezio trilogy, I just couldn't get into. And I don't know necessarily why it was that I couldn't get into it, but I just couldn't for whatever reason. And then Assassin's Creed 3, I actually didn't buy it, but I ended up getting it. At the time, my PlayStation 3 had died, and I sent it in for servicing from Sony, and they couldn't fix it, so they sent me a new PS3, and the one they sent me was the bundle that came with Assassin's Creed 3. And so, I figured, well, I got the game for free, I might as well play it. I ended up playing through the whole thing. I actually quite liked it. I know that that's not near the top of the list for most people, but I enjoyed that one. And then Black Flag, I liked quite a bit. I liked the ship combat and all that. It was obviously a very different game, not being confined to, the city and the power of verticality and all that the series was known for. And then I really dropped off hard. I played whatever the next big one was either Origins or Odyssey or whatever one was kind of the big change into having like the whole leveling up system, and it had like a battle pass or some shit shoehorned into it, and I just couldn't do it. The gameplay loop just became so monotonous and boring that I just couldn't get into it anymore. And then the only one that's really intrigued me was Mirage, and I'm sure I'll probably play Mirage at some point this year. It'll become so cheap that I'll pick it up on sale or something like that. Same with I don't know why this popped into my head, but same with Forspoken. Because Forspoken was a game that I was super excited about, and then I played the demo and became less excited. And then the full game came out, and people were just like, it's not there. That's another one that I've been just waiting for. Like, keeps getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and eventually it'll hit that like $20 or less line, and I'll pick it up. And I imagine with Mirage, that'll probably be coming within the next 6 months. So I'll get around to checking those out then. But Skull and Bones, I don't know. Even if my buddy owns a video game store, and they always post pictures of when they get new releases. Even if I see him taking a picture of a physical copy of Skull and Bones, I'm still going to be skeptical that that's a real game. I don't know what it's going to take for me to believe that it's a real game. I think that this is like the greatest evidence we have that we're living in a simulation. But all right, next up, Open Roads. Open Roads got announced a little while ago, and I've kind of been waiting for it to come out. So this is a game being published by Annapurna. They're pretty selective with what they put out, and it seems similar to the style of game is like As Dusk Falls, maybe a little bit in there of Life is Strange, a little bit of the Telltale games. It's a it's more like you're watching a movie with some interaction kind of, but it's not an FMV game. It's, it's fully animated and all that. This was originally being made by Fulbright, and then Fulbright went through their full downfall of everything. And they are using a different name now for this. I really enjoyed the Fulbright stuff. I really liked Tacoma and Gone Home quite a bit. And this was their next game, but everything just kind of fell apart with the leader of the studio. His name was what was it? Steve Gaynor, and a lot of accusations of sexual harassment, and then just everything had fallen apart. The whole studio essentially abandoned him, and this game's been delayed for I don't know if I necessarily say delayed, but I have to imagine that all of that shit happening in the studio, kind of going into exile and all that, probably led to a little bit of a delay. The game did only get announced a few years ago, so it's not like we've been waiting years and years and years for this thing. But I am very much looking forward to it. And then also on that same day as Pacific Drive, this game got announced just a couple of years ago. It's I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. If you remember the trailer, it's a first person, you were in a car and you were kind of driving through like a rainstorm, and I don't know if it's quite necessarily an alien invasion that's happening, but something is going on. It's a survival game, first person perspective. I think maybe, if I'm trying to look up, I want to say that maybe this is supposed to be like some type of like Lovecraft type thing, like a cosmic horror type thing. Let me see if it says anything in here. Oh, Metal Monsters. Okay, so maybe it's evil robots instead. I thought it was aliens or something. But this looked pretty cool. I do not do well at survival games. I am very, very poor at them. But I would like to give this one a shot. I am very interested in this. And then the last release, last major release of February 29th. This is the next edition of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I know people are very, very excited for this. I was truly blown away by Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII, I played it. I bought it the day it came out. It was 97 or 98 or something it came out in. And just was super let down. I had such an affinity for us in the States, Final Fantasy 2 and Final Fantasy 3, which I mostly like Final Fantasy 3, which is Final Fantasy 6 on the Super Nintendo. And, Super Nintendo was still making games at that time. Like Mario RPG was still yet to come and all that. And I was just so into that 2D style. I just really loved that art style as a child that I just couldn't get into just these really harsh and ugly polygonal character models. And I just couldn't get into Final Fantasy VII. I don't even think I made it past the first disc when it initially came out. Maybe I did, but I don't think I did. And then I didn't pick up the remake when it came out at launch, but I eventually did last year. It was around this time last year, in the beginning of the year, when there just wasn't a lot going on. It was on PlayStation Plus, and I was like, let me pick it up. And I got pretty far into it, but they had, because they were not just doing a straight remake, they were doing it in these segmented chunks. I felt like they just put way too much filler and bloat into the game, and I just couldn't keep up with it. And then the combination of that, and then the year was starting to pick up and new releases were coming out, it just led to me dropping the game. So I don't understand why I would purchase this, because I didn't finish the last one. But for the people that are into it, I know they've been waiting a very long time, and I think it's going to be a big release, and I think it's going to be a game that gets talked about quite a bit, and probably early contender for probably the biggest game of the first half of the year. I'm sure we're going to get some more games announced, but you'll see really quick once we move into March. Then there's not much left that has an actual date. Of course, we'll start getting dates, at some point. But I think that that's certainly the biggest game to start off the first couple of months of the year. Because if you look at like 2023, the year really didn't get started for a little bit. It wasn't until we kind of had that 1-2 punch of Hogwarts Legacy and Jedi Survivor that things really started kind of cranking along. And it's kind of the same way. We have Prince of Persia in January, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth in January, and then February has a couple of things like Suicide Squad and then Final Fantasy. So we get a little bit more than we probably had last year at the beginning of the year. But I think Final Fantasy is kind of that like real kickoff of, okay, things are starting to ramp up. But then you got to wait almost an entire month until kind of the next series of stuff. It's not until like the last couple of weeks of March. Dragon's Dogma 2 is coming out March 22nd. I actually just played Dragon's Dogma for the first time a few weeks ago. I was just, like I said, now that I've been winding down, I don't have to worry about playing games for Game of the Year or anything like that. I've just been playing random games. And I saw it was on PlayStation Plus, and I was like, all right, let me download it. And I played it for like an hour and a half, something like that. And I was like, this just isn't for me. I knew pretty much right away this game just isn't for me. So I don't have any interest in Dragon's Dogma 2, but I know that there is a dedicated like cult following for Dragon's Dogma. And I think from what I can tell, people didn't think that a sequel was ever coming, at any point. So for that to get announced, and then they're really making a big deal out of it. Capcom is really kind of marketing this pretty heavily, pushing it really hard. They did that whole thing where they like dedicated like an entire day to it, where they had like developer interviews and they showed a ton of gameplay. They did the release date. Like they're making it feel like a big thing. And I think that's awesome. I think Capcom realizes that if there was enough with the first game to garner a cult following, and the second game is shaping up to look really good, maybe we can transition this from being a cult game to a mainstream game, because Capcom's been on a roll, over the past few years with, Street Fighter having its best entry in a long time, Resident Evil going first person with the past two games from that series, as well as the highly regarded remakes that they've been doing. Monster Hunter has always been doing really well, especially since World. I think Monster Hunter has definitely kind of crossed more into the mainstream since World came out. And I think that they're looking for Dragon's Dogma 2 to be their next entry into their kind of larger, hey, we are really kind of doing things here at Capcom again. So I think that's going to be a pretty big release. Two other games also come out on that day. Princess Peach Showtime. The Princess Peach game that Nintendo showed off at a couple of directs. They showed it off in just like it was like an untitled game. They showed like a brief trailer, but that brief trailer did have gameplay. And then they did a larger look at it where they actually announced like a date and a name and all that stuff. This is actually the second Princess Peach game. The first one might be the most sexist game of all time. It's basically about how she as a woman can't control her emotions. It was on the DS. I remember we used to get people when I was working at a video game store, people come in and ask for it. And it was actually like pretty hard to find. I don't know if it's like super expensive now. I don't remember it being super expensive at that time, but I just remember it being really, really hard to find, but it had, demand for it. This game actually looks pretty cool. I don't know, maybe we'll check that out and, give it a shot, I'm kind of curious to see what they do. Some of the gameplay that they showed off looked, fairly interesting. And then the other game, which just got announced at, was it the Game Awards? I think this is a pretty quick turnaround for it, is Rise of the Ronin. It may have been announced earlier and I just didn't pay attention to it. But Rise of the Ronin is a PS5 exclusive. It's the next game from Team Ninja. You will recognize Team Ninja as the makers of Dead or Alive, but also more recently Wolong Fallen Dynasty, the Neo games. And they also did that Stranger in Paradise Final Fantasy Origin game. Team Ninja always puts out like pretty decent stuff. I can't say that this is kind of calling my name because they do have a pretty strong reputation for making very, very difficult video games and very punishing games. So probably not for me, but Friend Davis, I imagine this might be up his alley. I'll have to talk to him. If he ends up playing this, maybe we'll get him on around that time to get his thoughts on it. That's one of the greatest benefits I have of of Davis is not only is he up for always doing the show, but he plays wildly different stuff than I do. So we can have that viewpoint from somebody that's like, not just me saying, well, it looks okay, I guess, it's somebody that's actually playing it and actually invested in it. So it's nice to be able to pull from that, to kind of talk about the stuff that I just am never going to play. The following week after that, March 26th, is South Park Snow Day. I know this game has kind of been getting dragged through the mud a little bit, but I honestly don't think it looks that bad. I mean, maybe it will be horrible. It's possible. It's a large departure from the last two South Park games, which were really well received RPGs. I didn't particularly care for Fractured But Whole all that much due to the fact that they kind of changed the combat system in a major way. They adapted more of a Chrono Trigger style, whereas the first game, Stick of Truth, was straight up Mario RPG. I've established this well time and time again on the channel. Is my favorite game of all time. I think that timing-based combat system is amazing and should have been more widely adopted across RPGs. And so when they took it away, I just immediately... It was originally going to be a day one purchase, and then I was like, you know what, I'm good. I played it eventually. I can't remember if I played it for the first time last year or the year before, but it was some point in recent memory. I think the biggest thing for me, though, with that game, I could have powered through with the combat because ultimately the combat system, it's not bad by any stretch. It's just different. But for me, Stick of Truth was really a love letter for fans of kind of the first 8 to 10 years of South Park, people that were watching week in and week out. They didn't really have a lot of references to like modern South Park in it, whereas Fractured But Whole had way more references to the current run of South Park with like the Tegrity Farm stuff, PC Principle. I'm like familiar with that stuff, but it's been a long time since I was a regular South Park watcher. So a lot of those Easter eggs references were just not for me. I just didn't get them. Whereas in the first game, I was like, oh, that's awesome. They had the Okama Game Sphere and all that stuff. And, things that I remember from watching the show. But I am certainly willing to check it out. It's going to like a third person action adventure. It looks almost kind of like I don't want to say Diablo, but I mean, it's kind of like, it seems like it's going to be like an RPG to a degree. Those like DPS numbers, it looks like, and all that. It looks like it's got a heavy emphasis on co-op or multiplayer in it. But I think they did say that it is, perfectly fine to play it by yourself. So I don't know. I'm color me curious on that. And then we go from March 26th to August 20th. There's not much announced for the summer months right now, and that's Black Myth Wukong. This game has been long awaited. It got announced several years ago during kind of like not necessarily the height of the pandemic, but not too far off. And it really kind of came from out of nowhere. It's from a team in China. I believe it's their first game. And it just looked super smooth. I mean, it looked really polished, and we don't get a lot of games from China coming over here outside of some like mobile stuff, maybe some MMO stuff, things like that. But this looks like, I mean, to me, it's hard to say without having played the game. To me, it looks kind of like a Souls type game. But it looks so good, and I know that it's probably going to be impossible for me to play unless they really do some nice stuff with accessibility with the difficulty options and allow people to kind of crank some things down or maybe make you deal bigger damage or whatever it may be. But I am so curious about this game, especially just the fact that it really just kind of came out of nowhere and it just like took over the Games Press when it came out. Like it was a pre-alpha video, and it got like millions of views on YouTube, and it was just going all over the place, and nobody really had any information on where the game was coming from. It was just kind of cool to see something just come from nowhere and become the talk of the industry. And then the only other game on the list that has a firm release date, September 9th. This game actually just recently got delayed, but this is Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. I'm not a Warhammer fan. I've never played the tabletop game. I've never really interacted with anything outside of the video games. I know there's a lot of content to be had within the Warhammer universe. I believe there's books, there's comics, all sorts of different things. I have watched Warhammer being played. I used to be really big into comics, And every week when I would go to the comic book store to pick up my books, you know, the store I would go to, it was really big into Warhammer. And so they would have all these tables set up for people to play. And it just looked so fascinating to just kind of sit and watch and see where people are doing. It was difficult to follow along because I just didn't really understand the rules, but just the level of commitment and the level of detail in the armies and, you know, people painting miniatures and all this stuff to really kind of customize things and make it their own was just always fascinating to me. But I can't imagine I would ever get into that side of the thing proper. But I did play a hell of a lot of the original Space Marine. This was kind of at the height of everything trying to copy Gears of War, with it being a third-person cover-based shooter. And of course, this was the big thing because the Space Marines had the chainsaw gun thing, and a lot of people thought, oh, they're just copying Gears of War, when actually it's in reverse. Gears of War stole it from the Space Marines. I genuinely didn't think we would ever get a Space Marines 2. They still make a lot of Warhammer games. There's probably like 5 or 6 that come out every year. It's seemingly like an endless pipeline of Warhammer games. A lot of them are typically like strategy games. You know, like there's like the Total Warhammer, and some of the top-down like computer role-playing stuff that just came out. Was it like Warhammer Trader or something like that? Just came out recently, or is about to come out. I've dabbled a little bit. I did play the bolt gun game last year, which was like the throwback to like mid-90s first-person shooters. You know, it kind of looked like a Quake or a Doom. I like that game quite a bit. It was very difficult, so I can only get so far in it. But I'm looking forward to Space Marine 2. I kind of want to see what they do with that. But all right, we are not done, because we do have a handful of games without release dates that we will take a look at. And I just wrote these down in alphabetical order since we don't have a release date, but they are announced at least for 2024. And I guess we will start with Avowed. This is the next game from, oh my God, why am I losing this? Obsidian, geez, I love Obsidian. I was really hoping that we were going to get the Outer Worlds 2 first, because that got announced before this, but we are getting Avowed first. So this is kind of, you know, Obsidian, I don't want to reduce it to just base terms, but Obsidian, you know, they made Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout New Vegas over the course of time has perhaps become the most beloved Bethesda era Fallout game. You know, because Fallout 1 and 2 were wildly different games made by different people. And then, you know, Bethesda took over and Fallout 3 became this first-person shooter RPG kind of thing. And that was the formula that essentially they have settled on. Even stuff like the Elder Scrolls, you could essentially call them first-person shooters because you have projectiles and whatnot. And, you know, there's melee in it and all that stuff. But, I mean, it's essentially the kind of the same formula. And Obsidian did New Vegas, and that's become very beloved. And then they stopped kind of working with other people's stuff because they also did Knights of the Old Republic 2, and then they started kind of doing their own originals, and they did Outer Worlds, which I really loved because it was kind of a stripped down version of Fallout. I didn't like the Fallout games. I didn't like 3. I didn't like 4. I want to say if I played New Vegas was very briefly, but I just didn't really like that style of game. And I remember at the time I was super concerned about these games in general, because this was around the time that Cyberpunk 2077, it was announced that it was a first-person game, and I was like, oh man, I can't stand Fallout. You know, Skyrim was okay, but I still couldn't even get through all of that. Like, I don't want to play this kind of game. And then Outer Worlds came out, and it was on Game Pass, and I was like, it's on Game Pass, I should just give it a shot. And I really, really loved it, and it showed me that I can play these games. And I played through Cyberpunk and loved it, and I played through Starfield, and Starfield was good. So, you know, I give Obsidian a lot of credit for really kind of turning my perception on these games around, and showing that, like, hey, I should be a little bit more open to different things. And I really love the Outer Worlds, and I think it's disappointing that a lot of people kind of maybe tossed it aside. I think there was some really interesting stuff in that game, and so I was really excited for Outer Worlds 2 when that got announced, and then we're getting Avowed instead. And Avowed is essentially, if them making the Outer Worlds was their response to, you know, essentially maybe the Fallout game they never got to do, Avowed seems to be their response to like Skyrim. You know, it's much more of a fantasy based thing. Although if you look in the trailer, there are guns in the trailer. So I'm not quite sure what to really classify it as, but I am very curious about it. I'm assuming that it will come out. You know, some of these games that we're gonna talk about, this list isn't that long, but some of these games do have a high probability of being delayed. It's because we don't really have a date yet, but there's also the chance that maybe the reason why they didn't put a date is because they are hoping for a 2024 release and just want to make sure they can announce one without having to delay it. But Avowed, I assume it probably comes out this year. It sounds like they've been working on it for a while because it's been a decent amount of time since they did a game. Outer Worlds was 2019. They did Pentiment, but Pentiment was made by a very, very small team. So I don't think that really affected this in any way. So I imagine that it comes out this year. I would say that one of two things happens with Avowed. Either because it's going to be on Game Pass because Obsidian is under the Microsoft umbrella now. I think either around what would have been E3 time, Summer Games Fest time, they do a trailer announcement and say, hey, it's out today. Or they do the trailer announcement and say, hey, it's out in September or whatever. I think it's going to be a fairly quick turnaround if it comes out this year. But I'm looking forward to it. Frostpunk 2. I didn't play the first Frostpunk, but I do like city builders, so I would like to get around to checking out Frostpunk 2 when it comes out. I don't know enough about this to say like, hey, it's actually going to come out this year or not. I've heard the name kicking around for a while, so I think they've been working on it for a bit. So maybe that lends more credence to it actually coming out in 2024. But I think that's a game we'll probably give a look at when it releases. Lollipop Chainsaw Repop, remake of Lollipop Chainsaw. I think they're having to make pretty significant changes to this game. I don't think they have the music rights to a lot of the stuff that was in it. This game barely played well, and I don't mean play well from a gameplay perspective. I mean from like a perverted perspective at the time when it came out. I don't know how well it's going to do in 2024. A lot of that game was about like just a really sexy character not wearing a lot of clothes. They hired Jessica Negri, who I think is still around doing stuff. I think she still does cosplay stuff, but she was like the really big cosplay girl at the time. They'd hired her to wear the character's outfit and promote the game and all this stuff. And I played the game. It was a very bizarre game. I actually liked it from a gameplay perspective. It's not the type of thing I normally would play, but I actually thought it was like fairly fun. It was very short. It wasn't a really lengthy experience, but I remember enjoying it when it came out. I don't know if I want to go back to it. That gameplay was kind of dated even at the time. I don't know how well it would hold up. They'd have to make some like pretty significant changes. So maybe we'll see. But speaking of remakes and remasters, yet another one. So Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is coming out. If you're wondering why there is no Luigi's Mansion 2 in the States, it's because here in the States it was called Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This is the 3DS Luigi's Mansion. I actually quite liked it. I remember picking it up when it came out, and I don't think I finished it, but I played quite a bit of it. I didn't play the GameCube version until I was an adult. I had a GameCube when I was a kid when it was like a current system, but I didn't end up buying a ton for it. That was mostly a Mario Golf machine for me. I genuinely didn't play too much of it. But I like this game. I like Luigi's Mansion when I went back and played the original. They were fun games. They always had kind of the, I guess the downside of being like very short games. The first one I believe is quite short. But I think that this is Nintendo kind of gets into this rhythm when they are nearing the end of a life cycle for a console. They start doing some more fan service type stuff with remakes and remasters or bizarre sequels you never thought you would see. And we are firmly in that with the Switch, from the Mario RPG remake to, we'll talk about it in a little bit, the Paper Mario remake, this thing, doing the Princess Peach game, instead of doing another mainline Mario like 3D game like Mario Odyssey was, we get Mario Wonder, just like kind of doing stuff like that. So they did like Kirby remasters. We're kind of getting just kind of like the oddball stuff, as they await to release their next system. And then the game on this list that probably has the record for being announced the longest amount of time ago is Mugenics. This is by one of the guys who did Super Meat Boy. I looked it up because I honestly thought this game had come out years ago and I just missed it. Because I remember hearing about it quite some time ago, and I just assumed it came out and just didn't do anything, and just nobody really cared. But it's still actually not out. It was announced in 2012. So depending on when this game comes out, it'll be like 12 years. We're approaching Duke Nukem territory at that point. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe people will still be into it. You know, Meat Boy obviously was a super, super popular thing at the time. And then they just never really kind of kept up with it. Either one of the guys that worked on it really couldn't get another hit to that level. So I don't know, maybe Mugenics will take everybody by storm. Next up, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. I was actually kind of surprised that this was coming out. When they showed the trailer off last year, I thought it was just like a big DLC for the last Flight Simulator, but it is a full-fledged sequel. It looks like they're going to mix in some new stuff with like rescue type missions and things like that. But I didn't play the last one. At the time, it was, if you kind of remember when it came out, it was really difficult to run on PC. It was super, super demanding. And it was kind of hard to run on an Xbox. At the time, it was the Xbox One. The series wasn't out yet. And I just never got around to playing it. As I got a more powerful PC a couple years ago, and as I got a, when the Series X came out, I just never got around to playing it. But I would like to check it out when it comes out. My thing with the flight games, and maybe this is just a holdover from it being this way when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, my dad was always into, like, if there's a racing game on the computer, we have to have a steering wheel. If there's a flying game on the computer, we have to have a flight stick. And I just don't have that stuff anymore. So, and I don't know if there's like a cheap, affordable, decent flight stick thing. So I don't know how much I would enjoy playing it with a controller or mouse and keyboard, but I don't know. We'll see. Next up, Multiversus. You may have thought Multiversus already came out. Yes, it did, but that was actually in early access, and they took the game away from everybody, and it's going to get its full release. We'll see what kind of changes they make. It was pretty well received. People seem to quite enjoy it. It's just a game in the style of a Smash Brothers or a Nickelodeon All-Stars, as that has been a thing recently. It has LeBron James in it, and Arya from Game of Thrones, and Batman. It's all the WB properties, and we all know that Warner Brothers owns the likeness of LeBron James. He is a facsimile of the Warner Brothers Corporation. He's not actually a real human. But I don't know. It got really well received, and they just did that weird thing of like, hey, instead of just leaving this in this early access state, we're just going to completely take the game away for some time, and then it'll be back. And at the time, they didn't say when. It's just like, like next year maybe it'll come back. Sorry that you spent all this money on it, but we'll be back at some point. So it's kind of an odd debacle around it, but we will see. Next up, we already talked about a tiny bit, but Paper Mario, the Thousand Year Door remaster. This is the GameCube Paper Mario. This was the series. Paper Mario started on the N64. This was kind of like after the success of Mario RPG. They didn't keep Mario RPG going because it was, mostly a Square property, because they had owned the rights to like all the ancillary characters in that universe. So instead of continuing along with that, they did the Paper Mario series. I could just never get into it. I played a little bit of the N64 version. I did own Thousand Year Door at one point, back when I was collecting retro games, and played a bit of it and did enjoy it. So I don't know, maybe we'll dive in. Maybe this would be a good comparison, having played Mario RPG recently and then this thing coming out at some point this year. Maybe it'll be a good kind of compare and contrast, between the two. Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl. This game delayed for a very unfortunate reason. The Polish, or I'm sorry, not, is that are they in Poland? No, Ukrainian. I apologize. That was, the war was going on over there, so they had to stop working on the game. But I hope it comes out this year. It's slated for a 2024 release, but we'll see. That's a really touch and go scenario. But those Stalker games are always super impressive from a gameplay perspective and a visual perspective. And it looked like with Microsoft was really kind of pumping some money and effort into this from a marketing thing. They made it like a highlight of some of their showcase events, and I think it got people really excited about it. And I hope it comes out, and I hope everybody kind of gets back to normal over there that was working on it, and I hope it ends up being a very big success for them. Next up, the game that I am looking forward to the most that has been announced for 2024, Star Wars Outlaws. I saw some people talking about this the other day, that it's not going to come out in 2024, which is interesting because there was that whole report not that long ago that said, hey, this game is further along than everybody realizes, and it's going to be out sooner than you think. And I think that led a lot of people last summer, when it got announced, that, hey, it was going to be out fall of 2023. And probably a good thing that it wasn't, because I think it would have probably gotten overshadowed a little bit by all the other stuff that came out in 2023. I think it has a much better chance of standing out in 2024. I still think this game is coming out in 2024. I think it's going to be a holiday release. And by holiday, I mean some point between September and November. I think it'll be out. If it does get delayed, that sucks. I am really looking forward to it. I like what they have shown so far. I expect within the next, maybe they wait all the way until the summer, but I would like to see them put out another trailer at some point. If they decide to wait all the way until like Summer Games Fest, or well, they do the Ubisoft Forward, right? That's the name of their thing. Maybe they wait all the way until that, which will be in July. And maybe that's next time we see it. That's okay if that's what they decide to do, but I'd like to see maybe a little bit of some stuff along the way, just to kind of, hey, remember this game's coming out and kind of keep it alive. Next up after that, Stellar Blade. This is a Sony exclusive. I don't want to just like put it down to the most basic terms, but this really just kind of looks like Sony's Bayonetta. It just looks a lot like Bayonetta when you look at the gameplay, minus all the weird naked hair stuff. I mean, if it plays like Bayonetta, then it'll probably be good. I always like the way those games play because I always thought that, the version of Platinum that makes like Vanquish and Bayonetta was always very, very good, rather than the Platinum that made that disappointing Transformers game. Platinum for a while was like every game they're cranking out is very good, and then it got to the point where it was a coin flip to see if you were going to get a good Platinum game. But I don't know, maybe this will end up being a big thing, and we'll check it out. Last two on the list, we'll go with the World of Goo 2 first. I'm actually really looking forward to playing this. I really like that first game. It was kind of a surprise announcement when we saw it. I think it was at Gamescom when they announced it. I want to see World of Goo 2. I like that first game quite a bit. I think that's going to be a fun one. And then last up, Wolf Among Us 2. This has been a long-awaited game. Probably a lot to do with the downfall and, I guess, pseudo-resurrection of Telltale Games. One of their traditional Telltale episodic games, much in the way of The Walking Dead, Batman, Borderlands, and all that stuff. Wolf Among Us, I enjoyed that game quite a bit. I read, I don't think I finished the series, but I read several, probably, when they turn them into the graphic novel things, at least between 4 and 6 of the Wolf of, it's based on Fables, is the name of the comic, but I really liked it. I thought the writing was pretty sharp and snappy, and it was a fun game. And I think even if you didn't read the comic, I think that it was still kind of this bizarre, odd thing that you could get into, and you could freshen up a little bit with some research. But it was a separate story from the comics that helped quite a bit, to lead people to not being totally lost. But this has been long awaited. I don't think that it's going to have the same, unfortunate, same impact it would have if it came out back when I'm sure they initially wanted it to, because that style of gameplay is kind of fallen out of time and or out of favor, because I think that one of the unfortunate things with Telltale is they just never really improved their engine. The games always kind of looked the same as the years went on. They just kind of looked more and more dated. And I think at one point they were doing some of the most cutting edge stuff in video games, and they just never really kept up. They just kept acquiring more and more licenses to make these licensed games. And some of them hit and some of them didn't. They did the Telltale game, or not the Telltale, the Expanse game in 2023, which I think is all wrapped up now. They were doing it still in the episodic format, but there was a much shorter amount of time between episodes. I think some of them were just a matter of a couple of weeks. And I think that from what I could see, it was fairly well received. I'm not familiar. I think The Expanse is a series of books. And then I know that there's the show that was on Sci-Fi and eventually went to Amazon. I've always wanted to try and get into it. I'm very picky about Sci-Fi, but it looked kind of interesting to me. I really like the Next Generation. I liked the Battlestar Galactica, the one with Edward James Olmos in it and Katie Sackhoff. I like that quite a bit, and this looked like it would kind of scratch that similar itch. I think I watched the first episode at one point, but it just kind of didn't hook me. But it's always kind of been sitting in the back of my mind. I watched so little stuff on Prime Video that it still kind of shows up in the continue watching. When I log into it. So I don't know, maybe this will be, maybe this year I'll check out The Expanse. I'm kind of in between shows right now. I just wrapped up a show that was like 6 seasons long. And then I've just been kind of catching up on movies, kind of waiting to find another show to kind of dive into. Maybe that'll be The Expanse. Maybe I'll start watching that. But the last thing I want to touch upon before we get out of here is the big question of the year for 2024 is will this be the year that Nintendo puts out a new console? I'm fairly confident it is. I think the Switch 2 or Switch Pro or the next Switch or the Switch U or the Switchy. Actually, I think Switchy would be a great name for it. I think it comes out this year. I do. I think that it's been enough time between the release of the Switch that that system is having a hard time playing some games. And I haven't had a Switch in a couple of years, and it was having a hard time playing some games a couple of years ago. And they were like first party games. And Nintendo is always the master of getting the most out of their systems because they're never on the same level as the other competitors, not since the Wii. It's been a while. It's been several console generations since they were competitive. From a technical standpoint with Sony and Microsoft. So, it was always difficult. You're always getting downgraded third-party ports and stuff like that. But Nintendo, they're wizards with getting the most out of the limitations that they impose on themselves with their system. So, I think that, we'll see what they come out with for like their first big heavy hitter. I know we just got Super Mario Wonder, but I have to imagine, because we also just got Zelda this past year, that unless they decide to go with a new Mario Kart, which might be a tough sell because they didn't do a Mario Kart on the Switch. They just ported over the Wii U one, and then they supported the hell out of it. They did a ton of new tracks and all that stuff. Like, they did a really good job supporting it, but it's been some time since a new Mario Kart. So unless they do a new Mario Kart as the big launch title, it's not going to be another Zelda. I imagine it's going to either be the follow-up to Mario Odyssey in terms of a sequel, or it'll just be the next 3D, third person Mario game. And I think that'll be their kind of initial big system seller for it. But I think it comes out in 2024. I would say, for the holidays, probably October, November, something like that would be probably a pretty good guess. The other big rumors, are we going to see a PS5 Pro? Are we going to see a Microsoft next, half step? I still think it's too soon. I get that these systems have been out for 3 years, but with how difficult it was to get these systems, some people didn't get them. Now they're readily available, but some people didn't get them until the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, which means that they've only had this thing for a year and a half. And now you're telling them, oh, you're going to have to spend not only $500 on this system, but you're probably going to spend $600 on this thing. Like, I just don't know if that's going to fly. I think Sony is more likely to do it than Microsoft. And it certainly wouldn't surprise me if it happens, but I just don't think we need it. I just really don't think we need it right now. There's still so many games coming out that are multi-platform games that are forced to get a previous gen version. And with the Microsoft stuff, I know that they're allowing Larian to get around it a little bit with Baldur's Gate 3 just to get the system, just to get the game onto the platform. But their whole thing of like, well, if you put a game on the Series X, it also has to run on the Series S. They're really hating the fact that they put that limitation on themselves publicly because that created a whole debacle with Baldur's Gate 3, where the hottest game of the year wasn't out on the Xbox because they couldn't get the split screen to run on the Series S, and PS5 get a huge head start with it. And, it just is what it is. But I don't know. I think yes, for the next Nintendo console, a big maybe, but hopefully not. I wouldn't even say probably not, just hopefully not for a half step from the other system makers. We'll wait and see. I think overall 2024 is probably going to be a little bit of a down year. We had so much in 2023 that I think that unless some like really crazy stuff gets announced, which I don't think it will, I think 2024 is going to be a lot lighter of a year. I think there's still going to be some really big games that come out, some stuff that we haven't heard about yet. But I mean, if you look through this list, of like really truly big titles, you've got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Capcom's certainly pitching Dragon's Dogma as a big title. We'll see if that happens. I think Black Myth Wukong has the ability to do that. Beyond that, I think Paper Mario will sell really well for Nintendo. And then you've got Star Wars Outlaws. Everything else, despite maybe being a AAA game, is not necessarily what I would call like a big monumental release. And I named off 4 or 5 games there. There are 4 or 5 big monumental releases just in the span of a few weeks in October of this past year. So I think it's going to be a lighter year, a down year, not a down year like a bad year. I think there's still going to be some really great games that come out, but I think it's just going to be a down year in the sense of like, we just kind of need a breather after 2023. There's still so many people that are going to be playing a lot of the 2023 stuff into this year. I'm going to be playing Baldur's Gate 3 at the beginning of this year. There's still stuff. There's stuff from 2022 I still haven't gotten around to checking out. I got to stop myself from playing more Civ 5. So like, we'll see what happens. But yeah, so that pretty much wraps up the year in preview. Next week's episode will be back to normal at the new Moonbase set. Christian will be back right alongside with me. Unfortunately, another year stuck with him. My resolution is to drown him in a river this year for New Year's. But yeah, thanks for an amazing 2023. And here's to what I hope is an even better 2024. See you again real soon.